welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as $50, but hey, it's something. Now, this episode title may be controversial, but some of you may go, what is this? I think some of you might not know. Some of you may know all too well what this means. This will probably be a controversial episode. I don't know how people will react, but I mean, I'll get to it when I get to it. But before we get into that, let's get right into the news. First, we're gonna start off with something pretty obvious, but I made a headline, so I should cover it. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh boy, what did she do now? She said Parkland school shooting was a false flag planned operation. In a previously unreported interaction, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene agreed with a 2018 Facebook commentary that the deadly mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School was actually a false flag planned event. In a separate Facebook post in 2018, Greene also claimed, "I am told that Nancy Pelosi tells Hillary Clinton several times a month, we need another school shooting in order to persuade the public to want strict gun control." Greene was a right-wing commentator before she successfully ran for Georgia 14. She's pushed for QAnon and Pizzagate conspiracy theories, and she's said, Seth Rich was murdered. Basically, Marjorie Taylor Greene has gone full into the Republican tradition of being completely batshit insane. But I mean, she's a Republican, so that was obvious to begin with. There's nothing else to say. Marjorie Taylor Greene's batshit insane, and the fact of the matter is, there are some people who do want us to work with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now you might say, who? Well, it's those people who say work with the populist right, because you know who the populist right is? Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's the populist right. And speaking of populist right, you know who else is on that side of the spectrum? Madison Cawthorn. Turns out Madison Cawthorn is, big fat liar. You see, Madison Cawthorn, the youngest member of Congress, and a paraplegic Republican, that was one of the things that he used in his campaign. It's like, I can't walk, I was training for the Paralympics, and I was gonna go into the Navy, and we will cry for me. You should make me representative because I wasn't able to do this because I got paralyzed. Turns out, neither were true. He was flat rejected by the, Navy and was technically not training for the Paralympics. Remember this? Well, you see, he technically could have been training for the Paralympics, but he kept phrasing it as if he was like, I'm on my way to the Paralympics. I'm so close. But he was not. The comparison that a Paralympian literally used was saying that you were on your way to be in the NBA and being on your 4th grade basketball team. Yeah, Madison Cawthorn is just... He also apparently got owned on CNN, where they literally were asking him point blank, do you have any evidence that we do not have? Because all these election fraud claims, you keep bringing it up, and, all the cases you keep bringing up have been thrown out. And he's like, well, yes, but I believe this case, this precedent in the United States Constitution. Well, yeah, but can you name the part of the Constitution you are referring to, Mr. Cawthorn? Well, Cawthorn, I've been really tempted to, make memes of him. One of the memes ideas I had was, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but, Mac and Me, there's this famous scene in Mac and Me where there's this kid in the wheelchair that gets, that gets thrown off of a thing, and they might say, well, isn't that a bit mean? Madison Cawthorn raped people, so I don't care. He incited a literal riot in Capitol Hill that nearly killed a bunch of U.S. representatives. Now, I know there are some people who are on the supposed left that are supposed that, for some reason like to praise this or something, but I happen to believe that riots are bad. You know what? Since I'm on the track of riots, might as well talk about the Capitol Hill riots now. Because, again, remember, there were a lot of lefties, well, supposed lefties, that were saying, like, oh, the Capitol Hill thing, AOC was making this big deal, like, oh, I thought I was going to die, wah. And some were even flat out being sympathetic to the rioters. Well, there's been a lot of revelations. Turns out, yeah, these were very well planned. They had, like, walkie-talkies and such. They had the plan of wearing all black so that people would mistake them for Antifa. And there have been a lot of arrests that literally show that the people there were armed. Like, they came with weapons and literally planned to murder members of the House of Representatives. Not only Pelosi, but also recently revealed AOC. And this shows how, like, unserious people are taking this. This is incredibly serious. You don't understand the implications of any of this. Like, people like Jimmy Dore, Marie Finesca, and, who's another guy? The big fat loser with the drawn-on glasses. Not Benny Gantz, you know who I mean. Jenny Vans, or whatever, something like that. Fiorella Isabel, like, all these people are, like, making these, like, lighthearted comments, like, oh, yeah, it'd be funny if the guy who was in charge of the insurrection was Speaker of the House for a day. I would like to see what he does. And, like, yeah, it would be kind of cool for these guys to actually storm the Capitol. That would be pretty hilarious. Thinking, like, oh, this is just some funny game. This isn't a game. People died. Literally, people died. And they are underplaying the severity of this. This is completely severe. There is a member of the United States House of Representatives, Jason Crow, who was literally in the zone to potentially have to defend himself and kill people. This is real. Look it up. Jason Crow literally has been in multiple interviews stating that he was fearful that people would be able to bust in and he'd have to kill people. He literally compared the riot to being back in Afghanistan. And the fact that people, for some reason, had to wait to figure out, like, this was severe as it is. Like Chris Richards, fuck you, I don't care. You're literally like, oh, well, Marie wasn't defending the rioters. She just thought they were simple protests. No! She was typing, literally, while they were busting into the window that they were going to break into the United States Capitol. And you should have known at that moment that things were serious. And other fucking brain-dead idiots who keep going like, well, how can you can't use the information that you're getting now to prove... What did you think was going to happen? As soon as they were breaking into the doors, what did you think was going to happen? Were they just going to go, hello, Speaker, can you please make Donald Trump president, please? No, that's not what's going to happen. You idiots, you morons. Look, I thought that people were intelligent, but apparently not. I have to get off this topic because this is... Here's a more lighthearted note. Joe Manchin's voters aren't letting him stop $2,000 checks. You see, here's what happened. Remember Joe Manchin? Yeah, the most conservative Democrat in the U.S. Senate? Well, you see, originally, when the Democrats won back the Senate, he immediately came out and said, like, well, I don't necessarily agree with the idea of $2,000 checks. That might be a bit much. I don't think we need to put any more checks. Now, all of a sudden, that immediately got West Virginians to run radio ads, buy billboards being like, yo, Joe, where's my 2,000? And now he's like, I was just kidding, man. I was just kidding. Well, I mean, we could agree on the amount. We could disagree on the amount, but I think we should definitely give more checks. West Virginians know how to get to work. Apparently, West Virginia has been doing way better in regards to COVID than other states. Well, I don't know. They're better at vaccine distribution. I should say that they're better at vaccine distribution than other states. Because they don't have that many CVS's in the state, so they have to take over giving the vaccines away themselves. It's interesting, yeah. I mean, I'm sure this is good. If Joe Manchin's on board, then we win. 2,000 checks, here we come. There's also been a bit of a debate in regards to the $2,000 checks, and I don't know all the specific in the particulars, but apparently the way things are going now, it appears that, Joe Biden, he promised $2,000 checks, but then apparently he wavered it a bit and basically said, okay, the 600 checks that we already passed, those will still go out, but we will also have a second check where it's $1,400. Brains that are good at math. Anyways, basically $1,400 and $600. But then his particular COVID plan gets into weird territory, and it's oh, come on, Joe, just make it simple, simplify it, whatever. You're the president now. Simplify your plan. Speaking of presidents, Jair Bolsonaro. Turns out the International Criminal Court is going to potentially charge Jair Bolsonaro over Amazon rainforest and indigenous groups. Indigenous groups and human rights groups accused Jair Bolsonaro for crimes against humanity due to the fact that his environmental policies and violations of indigenous rights are pretty much ecocide. William Borden, a Paris-based lawyer, submitted a request for a preliminary examination for the tribunal in The Hague, Netherlands, on Friday. The chief prosecutor will then determine whether there are grounds of investigation against Bolsonaro. There's no deadline for the decision, but it is a matter of great urgency. I'd really, really like to think that this would actually be a good thing. Trial bad people, much like how we're doing with our fascistic-leaning president. But we'll have to wait and see if Jair Bolsonaro actually gets tried or not. Now, heading our way to the United States back, we go to New York, where we're going to talk a little bit about the mayoral race. You see, there's a mayoral race, obviously. It's going to be one of the more hotly contested mayoral races of the cycle, because New York City is a big city, and it's kind of got 2019 Chicago mayoral race vibes. You see, everybody is trying to claim the mantle of, I am the most progressive person in the race. I'll probably make a more in-depth video about the race when things officially, when things get closer. The race is in June. Well, the primary race is in June. So I'll probably make one before the primary when things completely finalize. But all you need to know is that the ones that seem to be trying to vibe for the progressive vote are Carlos Menchaca, Dianne Morales, Scott Stringer, Maya Wiley, and Andrew Yang. You see, Dianne is more of a newcomer. Carlos Menchaca is more of a, he's a member of the city council. Scott Stringer is a comptroller who is sort of the Warren-ish person in the race. Maya Wiley worked for Bill de Blasio, so she kind of has that going for her. And Andrew Yang, well, he ran for president with the whole idea of UBI, so that's what he has going for him. And you see, things have been getting a bit divisive because there really is, because I think we could have had a potential figure that we could have united behind if someone like Jermaine Williams or Cynthia Nixon ran. But you see, we're kind of in the middle of a concern because, again, who do we back? Well, here's how things are currently going right now. Scott Stringer, you see, like I said, he's more of the Warren Democrat. So he kind of has the interesting appeal. You see, he's got the endorsements of some prominent Bernie progressive people in the New York place, like Catalina Cruz, Yulin Yu, Julia Salazar, but also has and he even has the endorsement of Jamal Bowman. but he also has Andrew Spilliant and Jerry Nadler, who are a little less progressive than him. Maya Wiley, she has the endorsement of Democracy for America, but also has the endorsement of Michael Blake, who was more of the kind of sort of top interesting guy, but and Andrew Yang, he's having a bit of a weird endorsement thing himself. You see, he's got the endorsements of some prominent progressives like Jen Perlman and Marianne Williamson, but also has the endorsements of Richie Torres, who I don't trust with a 10-foot pole. And Andrew Yang gives the perfect reason to why I don't trust him or Richie Torres right there. In an article released, it explains Andrew Yang's, connections with the Jewish community. That's good, trying to bring a connection to the Jewish community. But there's one paragraph that has been getting people in a bit of a hizzy. A Yang administration will push back against the BDS movement, which singles out Israel for unfair economic punishment. Not only is BDS rooted in anti-Semitic thought and history, harkening back to fascist boycotts of Jewish businesses, it is also a direct shot at New York City's economy. Strong ties with Israel are essential for a global city such as ours, which boasts the highest Jewish population in the world outside of Israel. Our economy is struggling, and we should not be looking for ways to bring small businesses, not stop commerce. Yeah, it's gonna be a no. Sorry, Yang, no. You stink, the end. And that's the thing. People don't realize this about Yang, and this is sort of a fault to a degree of people who are it's when you try to get the outsider candidates to pay attention to run for big issues. Being an outsider, to be fair, being an outsider, you want to know what being an outsider means? It means you technically don't know. If you're an outsider, you legitimately don't know much of the issues. I'm being serious. Andrew Yang knew about his bread and butter issue, the UBI plan that he proposed. Well, okay, that's a little bit different. He actually didn't even know much about that because he changed his mind on it on a particular, on a fly. As soon as people called out that it was more of the right-wing libertarian plan, he shifted it to be more of the left-looking plan. But when it came to other issues, he legitimately just didn't know anything. Israel. He just deferred. The thing that people keep criticizing AOC for, he deferred to party leadership. And this shows, his blatant unknowingness. And the Yang Gang in general just doesn't really seem to get it. I hate to use this as an example, but there was a certain individual who, I've talked about on this channel a bit, who, when they literally were trying to, call out, they were doing this thing about BDS, why doesn't BDS just talk about, Iran and other these issues? Why don't they talk about Egypt or Iran or Saudi Arabia? Why do they only focus on Israel? It's because BDS was founded literally to talk about the Israel-Palestine issue. It was founded by Palestinians talking about the Palestine issue. You're supposed to be the smart guy. You're supposed to know this. A lot of people, yeah, and to a degree, Yang, he didn't kind of, I don't know. Yang kind of tackled in, casual racism a bit. Think about it. He was an Asian guy whose slogan was math. Come on, man. But anyway, speaking of New York, we have something interesting. New York District 22, they still haven't picked their they still haven't picked the person who will be their representative. Their race is still pretty close between the Democratic incumbent and the Republican opponent, with a Libertarian opponent who's just kind of there. It's really close, and they're still kind of being I don't really know what to do. But here's the thing, what's happening for the New York mayoral race probably could have been used in this race. They could have cleared everything right up. You see, New York's mayoral race will be the first race in New York that will have the option of ranked choice voting. Perhaps it would have been useful to do that for this race too. Because think about it. The Libertarian nominee, he has a very small margin that could easily just put one of the two over the top. Doesn't even matter who they chose as their second choice. The votes would decide it. That's why ranked choice voting should be put nationwide. We all should know. We should all be able to have this option. But anyways, now on to the last major story before we get into the main topic. And this is kind of interesting, kind of related. Well, remember back in 2016 when, they asked, Donald Trump and all the other Republican candidates, would any of you, say, can any of you say right now that you will not run a third-party nomination in the general election? And Donald Trump didn't raise his hand, or did raise his hand, or something. I forget how the question was asked, but basically the crux was, is there potential that one of you will run a third party? And Trump basically was the only person that didn't promise to not run as a third party candidate. Well, here's the news. Donald Trump has decided he might form a new political party called the Patriot Party. The fear that many people have been thinking has finally come true. Or may come true. Trump is thinking, the thought is in his head, to form a new political party. Now, this should incite fear in some, pleasure in others, but also, let me figure out who we would please. It pleases the Trumpites, because the Trumpites will follow Trump anywhere. If he joined the Libertarian Party, they'd follow. If he joined the Green Party, they'd follow. Constitution Party, they'd follow. American Solidarity Party, they'd follow. People's Party, they'd follow. They'd follow him anywhere. It brings fear to pretty much everybody else. Well, third-party advocates might be a bit happy at the prospect of Donald Trump forming a political party that could potentially be viable against the two major parties. But, I'm technically in that crowd, but I don't think this is a good idea because I don't like the idea of Donald Trump having a political party. I don't like the idea of Donald Trump running anymore. I don't want him to run for anything anymore. This is getting very controversial amongst a lot of circles. Some people are saying, oh, I'm excited that Trump's forming a new political party so he can split the Republican vote. Spoiler myth isn't real, but whatever. Some people are saying that they are a bit fearful that Donald Trump might be able to take this new party into the White House. But there is one aspect that many people are thinking about. Now that this is leaked, I'm even starting to think maybe this isn't even real. I'm not going to say that Donald Trump hasn't at least thought about forming a new political party. But think about it. Why would this news story come out now when he is currently being impeached? Maybe he has a Republican strategist that is trying to tell his Republican opponents, hey guys, I think maybe we should invoke 14th Amendment. Basically, this might be the final nail in the coffin to get Donald Trump to not be able to run for public office anymore. He could still technically create this new political party, but if he can't run for it, what would be the point for him to really create it? Well, unless he wants a Josh Hawley to take up the mantle of this party and then run for one term and then anoint Donald Trump king in the next term. That really is just la la land at that point. I will say one thing though. Patriot Party, if it gets formed, Constitution Party goes bye-bye. The Constitution Party is already cracking as it is. They can't get the new young paleocons, and a bunch of these old paleocons will probably go with the Trumpish party. So I think Constitution Party is gonzo. But speaking of third political parties, now let's move on to the main topic of this video. The very contentious political topic that again, this will be pretty controversial, but if we want a reliable third party down the road, then this has got to be revealed. This has got to be shown. Now, this will be simultaneously an article on IPR, and for the most part, I will be reading what the article that I've written says, but for the video, I may go off script and go on to a certain tangent with certain aspects of this, but overall, the same video topic, it will be covered in an article, so the article will probably be more concise, but this will probably just be me explaining all this stuff, and I'll even go so far as to play the clips and stuff that I have linked. But basically, and like before I get into that, I'm going to give you a little bit about like my thought process. You see, while things were going on with Movement for People's Party, I was thinking like, how can I, there is a historical comparison to this, but I can't find the one that fits right. I was thinking like, are they like the Socialist Labor Party or any of the other smaller left parties in the United States history? But I was like, no. That can't be quite right. But then, like, there's one part of the article, and I'll just say it is in the thumbnail. That comparison was the thing that made me think, like, it snapped, like, oh, it all makes sense now. This makes too much sense. Like, that was the key. The thumbnail comparison is the key. Alright, now that we have some explanation out of the way, here is the article and the explanations. There has been a lot of talk about Movement for People's Party in regards to recent actions they've taken that have seemed to be mostly undermining the left by going hard against AOC and the Squad, while cozying up to less than desirable people. While all this was going on, I was thinking, is there a way I can sum it up historically in a way that makes sense? And it just so happens that there is a way to compare it. Movement for People's Party is the new Union Party. For those who may be unaware, let me give you a brief explanation. In the 1930s, there was a rise in left-wing political activity in response to the Great Depression. While many were satisfied with FDR's New Deal as a way to combat the Great Depression, there were some that felt that they needed to go far enough. The Socialist Party felt that they needed to adapt to socialism. The Communist Party felt that Stalin-style communism was the way to go. Socialist Labor Party had De Leonism. But one opponent seemed to strike interesting. Democratic Senator from Louisiana, Huey Long, had an alternative plan entitled Share Our Wealth. While I could go in depth about the history of the Share Our Wealth program and the validity of the plan, that really is mostly irrelevant then to their plan on how to implement this plan. You see, Long had originally intended to start a separate political party to push for his agenda in the 1936 presidential election. However, before he was able to do so, he was killed in 1935. Despite this, a group of his allies decided to pursue this political movement under the moniker of the Union Party. I believe enough similarities exist between MPP and them that we can draw parallels between the two groups. The first comparison that we can provide is the idea of these two political groups trying to be a sort of leftist populist movement with the intention of drafting a particular candidate to run for the upcoming general election. Long being that particular figure for the Union Party, and Movement for People's Party starting off as a way to draft Bernie Sanders to take an independent run in 2020. Well, that's of course how the two groups started. Of course, these two groups have tried to evolve and transition into a more broad political movement that has tried to appeal to populists on both sides of the political aisle. Well, of course, this isn't as extreme as many of the other people that I will mention later. I feel that having Movement for People's Party's convention for 2020, including people such as Jesse Ventura, who point-blank states at their convention,
"I'm fiscally conservative, but I'm socially liberal,"
obviously shows their intention to try and appeal to a more right-wing audience. A second comparison comes from the party having members and goals that are not so well-intentioned, an example of which from the People's Party side comes from the recent revelation that their force-the-vote pressure campaign was actually more intended to drive a wedge between activists and progressive Democrats in Congress. Some examples include, if Justice Democrats worked, if reforming the Democratic Party from within worked, why form a People's Party outside of the Democrats? The plan is to use force the vote as a wedge to break leftists and Medicare for All supporters away from Democrats. If the goal of V is to win Medicare for all, sure it will fail. If Justice Democrats like AOC are viable, then what is the point of MPP? If the Democratic Party can be reformed from just electing progressives to it and changing it from within, why even focus on MPP? The existence of AOC in the squad repudiates the point of the MPP and other messages like it. Similarly, the Union Party was created with an ulterior motive of splitting the left-wing vote in 1936, and the subsequent fallout of Alf Landon's presidency would in turn push the Democrats to adopt the Share Our Wealth platform for the following election. Another minor example from the Union Party era was the individual that they ended up choosing to be their presidential nominee, William Lemke. While Lemke was an overall progressive populist who actually had major agreements with FDR, he had a personal grudge against him for vetoing the Fraser-Lemke Farm Bankruptcy Act, which was what propelled him to run his Don Quixote-like candidacy in the first place. Interestingly enough, despite him being their nominee, he was not the face of the party, similarly to how Nick Brana is supposed to be the party's leader, but he takes a back seat to some more individuals on the advisory board. Speaking of which, a third comparison revolves around the fact that both of the party's most vocal supporters are popular figures in a new media landscape. For Movement for People's Party, that figure is of course Jimmy Dore. Dore hosts an independent media political commentary channel on YouTube, amassing over 373 million views on his channel's lifetime. While he started off as a radical Bernie supporter, he gradually shifted into a fierce critic of Bernie. The validity of his critiques vary. That is similar to the primary leader of the Union Party, Charles Coughlin. Coughlin was a populist radio host who had an estimated 30 million listeners tuning into his weekly radio broadcasts. Originally, he was a diehard Roosevelt supporter, even claiming God was working through Roosevelt and the people who were stopping the New Deal were anti-God. However, by the end of FDR's first term, he had become a fierce critic of FDR, starting off as sort of a left populist demagogue whose economics were to the Roosevelt's left, but he gradually added more aspects of the party's rhetoric that tainted even other anti-Roosevelt leftists from joining up with them, such as Norman Thomas and Earl Browder. The final noticeable comparison is the accusation that both parties' coalition has ties to fascism. Now, to tread lightly, I personally am not accusing Movement for People's Party of being fascist. However, some of the individuals they have chosen to align with do raise some suspicion. Back to the Dore-Coughlin comparison, Coughlin became an open anti-Semite who expressed open sympathies with Hitler and Mussolini as the antidote to capitalism and communism. Dore, while of course not explicitly arguing for full-on fascism, thankfully, has expressed some things that Coughlin may or may not be more approving of. For example, recently, to the point where I did not even add this into the article originally, he has praised the Boogaloo Boys. Dore stated he does not know much about the Boogaloo Boys, so I will give an addition to people who may be in his similar mindset. The Boogaloo movement, whose adherents are often referred to as the Boogaloo Boys, is a loosely organized far-right anti-government and extremist political movement in the United States. The movement has also been described as a militia. It adheres that they are prepping for or seek to incite a second American Civil War, which they will call the Boogaloo. In fact, the reason that they use the term Boogaloo is so that they can get under the radar. You see, instead of saying that they are going to kill people, they will say they are going to start a Boogaloo. And similarly, he has also been noted to quote a neo-Nazi twice. The paper Dore quotes is "All America Must Know That the Terror is Upon Us" by Kevin Alfred Strom, a well-known Nazi and white supremacist. To determine the true rulers of any society, all you must do is ask yourself this question: who is it that I am not permitted to criticize? We all know who it is we are not permitted to criticize. We all know that it is a sin to criticize. Sodomy is no longer a sin in America. Treason and spitting on, urinating on the flag is no longer a sin in America. Gross desecration of Catholic or Protestant religious symbols is no longer a sin in America. Cop killing is no longer a sin in America. It is celebrated in rap music. The degradation of beautiful young girls in disgusting pornography is no longer a sin in America. The killing of multiple millions in the next generation in the womb is no longer a sin in America. But anti-Semitism is the ultimate sin in America. But as things get worse and worse, we are losing our fear of this silly word. We all know who it is that controls the wealth of our nation through their exchanges and counting houses in New York. We all know who it is that has deformed the mind of the two generations of America with their television programs.
And there's a saying, and maybe I'll butcher it, but it's, if you want to know who rules over you, it's who you're not allowed to criticize. And if you mention that fact, you're called anti-Semitic in the United States, because if you want to know who rules over you, just find out who you're not allowed to criticize.
Another comparison that may be a bit more blatant is the comparison to another one of the party's prominent supporters, Nico House. While he is not on the advisory board of the party, he has been frequently invited to party groups and is frequently supported by many of the party's members, so he should be at least partly considered in the People's Party coalition. Nico House is the host of his own YouTube channel similar to Doris. While it could compare him to Coughlin as well, one comparison that I think fits a whole lot more is the comparison with one of the party's other major leaders, Gerald L.K. Smith. Smith was similar to Coughlin in many ways, using his religion to push people to his cause, and was also pretty blatantly anti-Semitic and had very noticeable fascistic tendencies. Nico, similarly, has formed some other interesting coalitions as well, working with notable far-right activist Jack Posobiec, giving an interview for his anti-Antifa propaganda film, while also appearing on Posobiec's OAN show to spew conspiracy theories. The interview begins with Posobiec claiming that Nico is,
and you're someone who comes to politics from the left, but also, I would say, more of a populist kind of standpoint.
Now, if you don't know the notable aspects of that statement, Posobiec is trying to imply that he is the real populist, and Nico is unlike other leftists, and he is more populist, as a sort of way to bridge a gap between the two people. Now, I am aware that this essay/podcast may come off as me trying to hurt Movement for a People's Party or minor parties in general, but I'm making it blatantly clear neither is the case. I myself am greatly supportive of minor parties. I mean, I pretty much cover third parties almost exclusively on my YouTube channel. I am part of a website that almost exclusively talks about minor party stuff. I have interviewed 2 independent presidential candidates, and I voted for 2020 Green Party nominee Howie Hawkins in a swing state. Aside from being a card-carrying member of a third party, you can't really get more supportive of third parties than I am. And this is not a way to disparage Movement for a People's Party in general. I was at the convention, I signed the People's Party pledge, and I signed the go-ahead to form the official People's Party. Of course, I do not believe that every single member of Movement for a People's Party or every single supporter of Movement for a People's Party are acting in bad faith or are crypto-fascists. Not even everyone in the Union Party was ill-intentioned either, Francis Townsend being the prime example. The point of this essay paper/podcast is simply to raise attention to concerns to the dark path that the Movement for a People's Party may be heading down if they are not careful. I want a viable left-wing movement independent of the two-party system as much as everyone else, but we need to make sure that this movement is not corrupted by bad faith actors as well. So yeah, that is all I have to say on this particular matter. Let's see how it's reacted with. I'm sure it will be reacted with great praise and everybody will love it. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or check out my articles on the Independent Political Report.